Today I'm going to talk about some tips on how you can use an external monitor, whether it be an on-camera monitor or an external one like this, to shoot better video of yourself. Now, ideally, you would be looking right at the lens, trying to connect with your audience, but inevitably, I always seem to need to check framing, and the action of me flailing my hands around draws my eyes over to the little flip out monitor. Now, I feel like there's a disconnect whenever I'm looking off to the side. Now on the Sonys, they flipped up. Most of them I can't even see them. But when it's off to the side, I find that it's really jarring. Now Casey Neistat, of course, wears his sunglasses for this particular reason, so he can still face the camera and we can feel like we're connecting to him while he's looking around and checking his framing by keeping his head still. But since you can see my eyes when I shoot my video, and most people are the same way, just glancing over, even if you keep your head still, that glance over gives a huge disconnect, I think, to the audience. Now, I have an on-camera monitor on here. It's like the Small HD Focus, which is a really good entry-level, like production type monitor. It's nice and small. It fits on your camera. It's easy to flip up back and forth. Now, the one that I have on here is a knockoff version. It's not really, in my opinion, good to use for the same purpose. They have different purposes, even if they look the same. This one is by Feelworld. It's also sold under the name of Andy Cine. It does allow you to get a 4K signal into the monitor, and I think it's 5.2 or 5.8 or something. So it's a decent size, but still fairly small, compact monitor. But when you put it on the camera, it's still mounted up fairly high. So instead of looking over at the side monitor, I'll be looking here to check my framing. And I still think that has a disconnect. But what I've done is I've added one of my favorite little small, tiny ball heads to one of them that fits onto a cold shoe. So I have that right on the top of my camera, and I have that going into the monitor. And then I shift that monitor forward and then tilt it to face me. So it's just above the lens. So the monitor is like as low as it can be, right, as close to the axis of the lens as possible. Now, it's actually better to mount it below the lens, because when we're looking at the little on-camera monitor, we still have to look at the upper part of it where our eyes are framed. That's kind of where we naturally will look. So when it's mounted below, you're not looking as far down. But for me, it doesn't work very well with this setup. And just kind of the thought that maybe my female viewers are conscious of men looking down. I really don't think that's a very mindful way to treat my audience. As you can see, I can look at it. I can check my framing, because on this particular setup, I can move my camera all around. So I do need to be able to check the framing periodically. And I still feel like this is much less distracting than looking off to the side. This is a much better way to do it. Now, this is a good setup. I really like that. But over here is the large monitor, and this is just a television. It's not like a production monitor or anything. I just made a DIY mount for it so I can mount it on a rolling light stand, and I have it just behind my camera. And because I have it just behind the camera, when I'm standing over there using this particular setup, my eyes will naturally look where my eyes would be, but they're behind the camera, right where the lens is at. So when I can check my framing just using my peripheral vision, and I will be naturally drawn to look where my eyes are behind the camera. So therefore I'm looking right at the lens, just actually through the lens slightly. And I think that's the best way to have a setup if you're shooting on a studio. Like if you have your camera set up in the same place all the time, I think this is the easiest way to set it up. So let's go take a closer look at that setup. All right, so what we have here, like down here, is a clamp, and I have my Rode VideoMicro mounted here just in front of the camera. That way it's a little closer to my voice when I'm talking. And when I'm standing here looking at the camera, I'm looking right here at the lens, and my eyes are on the monitor right here. So when I'm looking at the lens, I'm looking in the proper place. My eyes are automatically drawn to look in that area. Now I can check this framing. I can look at this monitor. I can see how I'm framed up, and that works really well. This is a pretty good setup if you're gonna have a dedicated setup exactly where you're gonna shoot in the same place every time, using just a inexpensive, like small, I think this is a 20 or 24 inch just monitor that has a HDMI on it coming right out of the camera, and then having my mic kind of like in front of me. This is fairly inexpensive. I mean, I don't have the best camera on here. I got a kit lens. I have a $60 mic. You could exchange this one for the Movo VR10. That would be a kind of comparable setup, and you can use pretty much any kind of monitor. Now, like I said, if you're doing green screen or anything like that, you definitely want to take the settings on the monitor and change it so the saturation's way down, so you don't get green screen reflections off of your face, off your glasses, and stuff like that. So I really like this setup. I also like working off this jib because it gives me the chance to move it around and frame stuff up. Like I can be looking at this camera, and out of my peripheral vision, I can see that I'm getting a little bit over the shoulder kind of shot. Here, let's just go wider and lower. Let's get an over the shoulder type shot, just while I'm also looking at the lens. It helps me frame everything up and still connect with all of you. So the monitor wouldn't normally be this high. It would be about right here. I do have the ball head on there. So that allows me to shift this down and get the monitor sitting right on the lens. So when I'm looking at the monitor, when I look up, I'm fairly close to being in axis with the camera, so I can check my framing. I really like using the jib. I like the ability to move the camera around and get different interesting shots. Having like a variation on my shots, I think keeps the videos from being too boring, even though I can ramble on at times. When I get all the little tricks figured out on how to shoot a stand-up talking to the camera type video like this, when I figure all those out, I'll definitely make a video speaking specifically to how to shoot a video like this on a short jib. It is my favorite setup. And I guess that's all I have today. So I love you all, and I hope to see you in the comments. Bye. We kind of got this Inception thing. We got it there and there and there and there and there and there. Woo! Blowing my mind.